Brilyn Hollyhand is a Youth Advisory Council co-chair for the RNC and the author of One Generation Away. And Kieran Laffey is a student at George Washington University and the vice chair for the George Washington College Republicans. Good morning, Gen Zers.
Good morning. Thanks for having us again. We appreciate it.
Great to see you.
Cool. So for those who don't know, members of Gen Z range from 16 to 27 years old. This new survey finding those who follow politics and media trends towards Kamala Harris. Not everyone is on board, though. Where do you stand? Let's start with you, Brilyn.
Yeah, I think my generation's waking up. I think as a first-time voter, I look at this election through a very simple lens. My generation's the generation that grew up in the middle of COVID, in the middle of a pandemic where they shut us out of our schools for a year and a half, where they made us strap that diaper to our face and told us we were evil, horrible human beings as we went to visit grandma for Thanksgiving dinner. We saw COVID-19, put big government in the spotlight. We saw how bad big government is, and my generation has a simple choice, a choice between freedom and tyranny. That's on the ballot in this election. A choice between chaos and stability. My generation is going to choose the candidate of stability, not Kamala Harris, the candidate of chaos. And I think it's that simple.
Well, Kieran, I'm a millennial, but I actually feel like Gen Zers are pretty rational when it comes to making decisions about finances and where to put their money. I actually give them a little bit more credit. Do you agree? Do you think Gen Z is pretty logical and can see through some of the proposals, such as Kamala Harris's plans to tax and increase, government spending?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I can tell you I am, and most of my friends are. And the message I'm trying to relay to most of my friends around college campus and people I know from back at home is, let's take the emotion out of this race. We live in complex times, and let's look at the issues. 3.5 short years ago, country was much more prosperous. We had a secure border, and Donald Trump, a lot of people don't think he's the nicest guy, but the facts were we were at a much better standing internationally, domestically, you name it. The cost of living has gone out of control. And, I think a lot of people my age, they're kind of realizing that that so-called American dream that our parents and people who've lived before us have been able to live is now becoming more of a luxury than a reality. So take the emotion out of it and ask yourself, do you want 4 more years of this? I mean, can you give me one issue that you're better off now than you were when Donald Trump's in the White House? And I think if you put it that way, I think the choice remains clear.
Well, it's good that Krisha has a lot of confidence in Gen Z.
I have confidence in you guys. You're smart. I'm hoping this is the next generation.
I love both of you, but I'm kind of on the fence with Gen Z, right? Some, they floor me like both of you. Great. And then the others, I'm like, okay, I wonder what their ecosystem is like. Ecosystem being, are they getting their values from their parents, from their uncles, aunts, school, college, especially a lot of these colleges and universities indoctrinate many of the Gen Zs, and they keep those values. So now, I'm not talking about your own personal experiences, but from your observations, not just your fellow Republicans, but also people within your age group that you see across the aisle. How do you think their views are being shaped? Is it social media, or is it coming from within, or coming from without?
Yeah, I'll start with this. I'll say I think it's the community around them. I'm in the middle of a college campus tour right now, so basically every single Tuesday and Thursday leading up to Election Day, over the next, 42 days at this point, I'm on a different college campus all across the country, speaking directly with my peers. And I'll say this, I kind of agree with you before I did this tour that it was kind of, seemed like there wasn't a lot of hope for my generation. It was kind of discouraging of what we were seeing coming from my peers. But the same way that our party is referred to as the silent majority, I think the blue-haired crazy liberals shutting down Yale and Columbia are the loud minority. Those are the 12, to 20 college students on a campus with the bullhorns and crazy colored hair. And nobody's giving coverage or airtime to the thousands of college students going to class like normal and going on with their day like normal because they're not out there shutting down the campus. Those are the real voters. Those are the people that have common sense. We look at the country right now and think common sense has left the room, but Gen Z's bringing it back to the table. And I think that's what we're going to see in this election. A lot of people who are too afraid to speak out, but actually have conservative views.
Well, to John's point, there's a lot of influence, especially with big tech. Yeah. TikTok, it seems very popular and influential when it comes to politics. But could this app and other social media platforms play a role in the election? Kieran.
I mean, I think 100% it does, and I have to agree with you guys. I go to school in a very liberal area, and the environment around you does definitely shape you. But, the things you hear from your professors and your fellow peers, I think it doesn't take away from the reality of life. And look, I'm 18. I'm about to start my life here in Washington, D.C. I want to rent an apartment. Eventually, I want to start a family. And, these issues are and have become so much more difficult under the current administration. So, look, I think, you hear the liberal waves from the obviously very biased media and the biased colleges that people like myself attend. But I think eventually, slowly but surely, and I've seen it happen, common sense is going to prevail. Reality is going to set in. Things like signing half your paycheck away to the government just to spend, our money in foreign wars and funding illegal migrant hotels in places like I'm from in New York, it just doesn't make sense. And I agree with Brilliant. People are definitely waking up. And, our job as young Republicans, I think we're both working hard with this, is to get that message across. The message of common sense. The Republican Party stands for common sense and a better way of life. And I think if we do that, we'll be very successful.
That's a very good point. A lot of people have grown accustomed to the government stepping in, giving handouts and things of that nature. But I think more and more people, especially when they get that first check, right? They're like, okay, who's FICA? And going down the list. Like, who are all these people? Or why are they taking half of my check? I think that's when reality begins to set in. Because as Kernan actually mentioned, when you start thinking about what you want to do with your life, how you want to invest into a home, and so forth, Braylon, I think that's when, if people were on the other side of the aisle thinking about government, empowering government, I think they slowly will begin to think, you know what, I want to take more control away from government and give that control to myself so that way I can make my own decisions.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I think a lot of this campaign and this election cycle has been centered around these vibes and these feelings. But Kamala Harris's campaign's vibes are not going to buy my generation groceries. Kamala Harris's campaign vibes are not going to buy my generation their first apartment or help us start a family. It's not just difficult to start a family, buy an apartment, or get groceries or gas in this administration right now, this country we're living in. It's about near impossible. And it's sad and it's unfortunate, but it's never been easier to sit down with a college student, regardless of how radical left wing they may be, and say, are you frustrated with the state of the country right now? Not just the economy, but with the border, with immigration, with what we're seeing with law and order. It's never been easier to say, just look outside on the street. We don't have to show you images of a far off country. We can show you what's happening here in America. It's very easy to have those conversations. I think Gen Z is actually, waking up to not just agreeing, but actually being willing to have open dialogue. And that's a major step forward in the right direction.
Well, maybe Gen Z sees through the vibes and the fleeting joy and is looking towards happiness, which is more, it's a longer term prospect, a longer term idea. But we are now approaching the 1 year anniversary of October 7th, and we've seen the protests on college campuses soar. Kieran, how is this affecting Gen Z voters?
Well, I think it's affecting Gen Z voters greatly. I go to George Washington. I was on Newsmax a few months ago talking about that, and I mean, the scenes were horrifying. We had kids who, they didn't seem like they knew what they were talking about, but they were, quite frankly, calling for radical chants, and they were harassing Jewish students. I go to a campus which is about 30% made up of Jewish students, and I mean, I was horrified. You have people calling for an intifada revolution, calling for the blatant destruction of the state of Israel. And you know what? I think, unfortunately, a lot of the Democratic Party base supports some of these radical policies with regards to the Middle East. And look, I think, and I'm into the polling and the numbers, a lot of young radical voters are going to stay home and not vote for either party, and it's going to benefit the Republicans because of this issue. Look, I think a lot of us have some common sense. October 7th was, I mean, a massacre, a horrifying day. You had over 1,000 innocent civilians slaughtered and murdered, and seeing these events take place on college campuses, it didn't make sense to me. It scared me, and I just hope they're not going to come back.
Hopefully they
Yeah.
don't. But the thing is that You guys actually helped me shift my paradigm in terms of my views on Gen Z. But we have to bring two Democrat Gen Zs on and see what they have to say about this election.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, but you guys are
luck
both
with
very
that.
rational Gen Zers. Appreciate your time. Brilyn Hollyhand, Kieran Laffey, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Have a
you.
good week.
Coming up, today's top headlines.